We are
Yeah.
live.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. So today is Yom HaShoah here in Israel, Holocaust Day, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And this isn't going to be a long thing. We just wanted to do something because, well, it's the whole point of today, to remember the pain our people have suffered and one of the most horrific tragedies to have ever befallen, like, the modern world. So I just thought it might be pertinent to read a quick passage from Night by Elie Wiesel. And yeah, lying down was not an option, nor could we all sit down. We decided to take turns sitting. There was little air. The lucky ones found themselves near a window. They could watch the blooming countryside flit by. After 2 days of travel, thirst became intolerable, as did the heat. Freed of normal constraints, some of the young let go of their inhibitions and, under cover of darkness, caressed one another, without any thought of the others, alone in the world. The others pretended not to notice. There was still some food left, but we never ate enough to satisfy our hunger. Our principle was to economize, to save for tomorrow. Tomorrow could be worse yet. The train stopped in Kasha, a small town on the Czechoslovakian border. They realized then that we were not staying in Hungary. Our eyes opened too late. The door of the car slid aside. A German officer stepped in, accompanied by a Hungarian lieutenant, acting as his interpreter. From this moment on, you are under the authority of the German army. Anyone who still owns gold, silver, or watches must hand them over now. Anyone who will be found to have kept any of these will be shot on the spot. Secondly, anyone who is ill should report to the hospital car. That is all. The Hungarian lieutenant went around with a basket and retrieved the last possessions from those who chose not to go on, tasting the bitterness of fear. There are 80 of you in the car, the German officer added. If anyone goes missing, you will all be shot like dogs. The two disappeared, the doors clanked shut. We had fallen into the trap, up to our necks. The doors were nailed, the way back irrevocably shut off. The world had become hermetically a sealed cattle car. There was a woman among us, a certain Miss Schachter. She was in her 50s, and her 10-year-old son was with her. Crouched in a corner, her husband and 2 older sons had been deported with the first transport by mistake. The separation had totally shattered her. I knew her well, a quiet, tense woman with piercing eyes. She had been a frequent guest in our house. Her husband was a pious man who spent most of his days and nights in the house of study. It was she who supported the family. Mrs. Schachter had lost her mind. On the first day of the journey, she had already begun to moan. She kept asking why she had been separated from her family. Later, her sobs and screams became hysterical. On the third night, as we were sleeping, some of us sitting, huddled against each other, some of us standing, a piercing cry broke the silence. Fire! I see a fire! I see a fire! There was a moment of panic. Who had screamed? It was Miss Schachter, standing in the middle of the car, in the faint light filtering through the windows. She looked like a withered tree in a field of wheat. She was howling, pointing through the window. Look at this fire, this terrible fire. Have mercy on me. Some pressed against the bars to see. There was nothing, only the darkness of night. It took us a long time to recover from this harsh awakening. We were still trembling, and with every screech of the wheels, we felt the abyss opening beneath us. Unable to still our anguish, we tried to reassure each other. She is mad, poor woman. Someone had placed a damp rag on her forehead, but she nevertheless continued to scream. Fire! I see a fire. Her little boy was crying, clinging to her skirt, trying to hold her hand. It's nothing, Mother. There's nothing there. Please sit down. He painted me, he pained me even more than did his mother's cries. Some of the women tried to calm her. You'll see. You'll find your husband and sons again in a few days. She continued to scream and sob fitfully. Jews, listen to me, she cried. I see a fire. I see flames. Huge flames. It was as though she were possessed by some evil spirit. We tried to reason with her, more to calm ourselves, to catch our breath, than to soothe her. She is hallucinating because she is thirsty, poor woman. That's why she speaks of flames devouring her. But it was all in vain. Our terror could no longer be contained. Our nerves had reached a breaking point. Our very skin was aching. It was as though madness had infected all of us. We gave up. A few young men forced her to sit down, then bound and gagged her. Silence fell again. A small boy sat next to his mother, crying. I started to breathe normally again. As I listened to the rhythmic pounding of the wheels on the tracks as the train raced through the night. We could begin to doze again, to rest, to dream. And so, an hour or two passed. Another scream jolted us. The woman had broken free of her bonds and was shouting louder than before. Look at the fire! Look at the flames! Flames everywhere! Once again, the young men bound and gagged her. When they actually struck her, people shouted their approval. Keep her quiet. Make that mad woman shut up. She's not the only one here. She received several blows to the head, blows that could have been lethal. Her son was clinging desperately to her, not uttering a word. He was no longer crying. The night seemed endless. By daybreak, Miss Schachter had settled down, crouching in her corner, her blank gaze fixed on some faraway place. She no longer saw us. She remained like that all day, mute, absent, alone in the midst of us. Toward evening, she began to shout again. The fire! Over there! She was pointing somewhere in the distance, always the same place. No one felt like beating her anymore. The heat, the thirst, the stench, the lack of air were suffocating us. Yet all that was nothing compared to her screams, which tore us apart. A few more days, and all of us would have started to scream. But we were pulling into a station. Someone near a window read to us, Auschwitz. Nobody had ever heard that name. The train did not move again. The afternoon went by slowly. Then the doors of the wagon slid open. 2 men were given permission to fetch water. When they came back, they told us that they had learned, in exchange for a gold watch, that this was the final destination. We were to leave the train here. There was a labor camp on the site. The conditions were good. Families would not be separated. Only the young would work in the factories. The old and the sick would find work in the fields. Confidence soared. Suddenly, we felt free of the previous night's terror. We gave thanks to God. Miss Schachter remained huddled in the corner, mute, untouched by the optimism around her. Her little one was stroking her hand. Dusk began to fill the wagon. We ate what was left of our food. At 10 o'clock in the evening, we were all trying to find a position for a quick nap. And soon we were dozing. Suddenly, look at the fire! Look at the flames! Over there! With a start, we awoke and rushed to the window yet again. We had believed her, if only for an instant. But there was nothing outside but darkness. We returned to our places, shame in our souls, but a fear gnawing at us, nevertheless. As she went on howling, she was struck again. Only with great difficulty did we succeed in quieting her down. The man in charge of our wagon called out to a German officer, strolling down the platform, asking him to have the sick woman moved to a hospital car. Patience, the German replied. Patience, she'll be taken there soon. Around 11 o'clock, the train began to move again. We pressed against the window. The convoy was rolling slowly, a quarter of an hour late. It began to slow down even more. Through the windows, we saw barbed wire. We understood that this was the camp. We had forgotten Meshachter's existence. Suddenly, there was a terrible scream. Jews, look! Look at the fire! Look at the flames! And as the train stopped this time, we saw flames rising from a tall chimney into a black sky. Miss Schachter had fallen silent on her own, mute again, indifferent, absent. She had returned to her corner. We stared at the flames in the darkness. A rich stench floated in the air. Abruptly, our doors opened. Strange-looking creatures, dressed in striped jackets and black pants, jumped into the wagon. Holding flashlights and sticks, they began to strike at us left and right, shouting, "Everybody out! Leave everything inside! Hurry up!" We jumped out. I glanced at Miss Schachter. Her little boy was still holding her hand. In front of us, those flames, in the air, the smell of burning flesh. It must have been around midnight. We had arrived in Birkenau. That is a chapter of The Night by Elie Wiesel. And I wanted to read that just to give everybody a taste of what the Holocaust did. We as a people are traumatized by that. It's an enormous pain that follows every Jew, no matter if they're Sephardi, Mizrahi, or Ashkenazi. In the words of Elie Wiesel himself, the reason why they were killed was because they were Jews, nothing more. And every Jew feels it, no matter how old or how young. It's a pain that we all feel right in here. And I just thought it would give a little context as to why things can be quite difficult for us these days. We're traumatized people, and it can be hard to move on. And although we've made great strides, we're still haunted by it. It affects our everyday lives. It affects how we think. It affects the actions we will take. Because the worst fear of any Jew is a second Holocaust. Yeah.
I think you summed it up very well, Jonathan.
And that was a fantastic way of summing it up. It's indescribable, the feeling in the country in Israel. We have the siren that goes off on Holocaust Remembrance Day, and I actually woke up to it today, and immediately, sat up in bed, and there's just dead silence because the entire country stopped moving, and everyone pays that. You get so lost in it. I don't know, is it a minute or 2 minutes?
Yeah, a couple minutes.
Yeah, it's a couple minutes.
A couple of minutes. It's just dead silent for a couple of minutes. Nobody speaks. And you've got all kinds of people in this country, disrespectful ones as well as respectful ones. But still, for that 2 minutes, nobody makes a noise.
Even if you're in the car, you'd stop it. And
Yeah. Cars stop, buses stop, everything stops.
Everything stops. People, there's plenty of video out there of people stopping in the middle of the highway. Everybody, the entire highway stops. People get out and stand.
People don't speak. Just literally the entire country is silent for 2 minutes. And that's extremely powerful, and it shows you how much we all really do still remember it.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's a haunting thing.
I was in Auschwitz 2-3 years ago. was a surreal experience. I was with a group of Samaritans. And when you're there, it's just a little bit different than when you're just thinking about it, because first of all, you have those ideas of this was not long time ago, and like, how can humans do this to each other? Of course, you have those thoughts. But you see, even as Samaritans, we also empathize with the Jewish people. They are like our cousins, and in a way, we also had our own massacres, so we can definitely relate with what you said, Jared, of not having those catastrophes happen again. So I think those 2 minutes of silence do give everyone like a, how can I say, a pill of waking up, remembering those days, so that they don't, so that we can do the best that they don't happen again.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I also made my way over there to see for myself what happened, and just going there had a huge impact on me. When you're there, you could almost feel and taste what went on, even though it's so long ago. Not that long ago, but it's very hard to comprehend that this happened less than 100 years ago. I think in this kind of today's age of madness on social media and so much hate being pumped through media or through social media and through all these things, that we really must think about the past and think about these horrors that have happened, and realize that it's way easier to hate than to love. And people need to look back at the past and understand where we went wrong. The Holocaust didn't just affect the Jewish people; it affected the whole of humanity. The Nazis, they went after disabled people. They went after LGBT people. They killed indiscriminately. And I just think that by remembering, by having this day, by preserving the memories, we can make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. And I really think that we must continue to educate the younger generations about what happened. In a few decades, we might not have any Holocaust survivors left to actually tell the stories and firsthand of being there. So I think it's our duty to keep that up.
Definitely.
You're right. It's
by doing things like this.
Just talking, remembering, reading their accounts. And I want to just touch on something real quick. That we have to stay vigilant, all of us, Jew or not, black or white, whatever you are, because this can and will happen again. And all it needs is for good men and women to do nothing.
That's right. That's totally true.
There's plenty of horrors going on in the world right now. Plenty of hate. It requires all of us to stand up.
Yeah, and there's plenty of people doing nothing.
Yeah.
That's it. It's time to take a stand, and if you see any injustice and if you see things that are wrong, don't hesitate to do something about it. I think fear stops a lot of people from doing something. I can just share an incident that happened years ago with my mum in London. She was on her way to work, driving to school, and a a gang of youths attacked an ultra-Orthodox Jew walking down the street. And my mum, being my mum, she pulled over the car. She started screaming and shouting and basically stopping the attack, pulling the people off the ultra-Orthodox man. And that put her life in danger, right? These gangs of youths, they carry knives, they got weapons on them. You don't really know what they could do. But she stepped in to stop an innocent man just being beaten indiscriminately on the street. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that lesson. We really, really must step in and do something if there is any injustice going on. And I would just like to take a moment to remember the righteous among nations who, during the Holocaust, did go to extreme lengths to save people during the Holocaust. And I think it's hard to even comprehend how much they risked their own lives to save other people.
Their families' lives.
Their families' lives, yeah. Completely.
Yeah, just tonight I watched this movie that based on a real story, The Zookeeper. Maybe you heard about it.
I haven't actually, no.
No, I haven't heard of it.
Search it up. It's a really interesting story of a woman who successfully saved hundreds of Jews from the camps.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And Oscar Schindler and all of them.
Yeah.
They really did risk everything. Their lives and their families. Everything they could risk, they risked by doing what they did. And they did it anyway just because it was the right thing to do. And because they saw past the discrimination. Because it wasn't indiscriminate. They were doing it out of discrimination. You know what I mean? They discriminated against everybody that wasn't white and Aryan.
And German.
Like then. Yeah.
It was a virus that was spreading, in Europe, and they were not going to take any chance. So
exactly. So
it's these people, the righteous among the nations. I would just say it's not even that they saw through the discrimination. I just think that they saw that what was happening was wrong, and it takes a very strong character to do what is right, to do what is good when the rest of the world has gone mad. It takes a very strong character to do that. And we should learn from these people. We should learn from the strength.
All those righteous among the nations did it, and they did it mostly, independently. And it shows that even in the worst times, there are people that are still capable of being the exception. And, showing their strength of character. So the only way to be like that is to be like that and, risk things, take risks for things that you believe in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Guys, this is the first time we've talked about the Holocaust at all.
I think so.
Yeah, we haven't brought it up on the show, partly because it's, and this is something that annoys me a lot in today's discourse. People bring up, people bring up the Nazis, people bring up the Holocaust as if it's some benchmark. It's not. It's not a tool to be used in an argument. Nothing can compare to it. And we want it to stay that way. Because if something happens in the future that could be compared to the Holocaust, we failed.
Yeah.
It was an industrial genocide.
Yeah.
Industrialized. Where the machines of industry, factories, everything the state had was put towards eliminating an entire group of people. And that is the only time it has happened. So if you're calling someone a Nazi just because you don't like their positions or you think they're evil, just call them evil. Because what you do when you say that, you're belittling the memory of those who died. You're belittling the memory of our grandparents and what they went through. You're belittling the actions of these truly horrid men who did this. It's not something to be thrown around at all.
Yeah. And also, we get accused a lot of trying to play the Holocaust sympathy card.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, you know, doesn't stop us from talking about it when it needs to be spoken about. But we can absolutely make our points without relying on the Holocaust, because we don't want to disrespect it to that same degree. But, you know, genuinely, the people that don't think it happened at all, and there are people that don't care that it happened to the extent they actually make disgusting remarks like "stop relying on the Holocaust to make it right."
Or people that want it to happen again, because those are out there.
Those are out there too.
They scare us.
People that can stop it.
They don't see the deeper side of it, I guess.
Yeah.
It's something that we you know, they say they tell you to learn from your past, but it's not something that we learn from. Like, it's something that, you know, as humans, I don't know if you heard about it, but it's like sometimes you feel like you can't get to a point where you even think, how can a human do such acts? But people can develop ideologies that are extremely discriminate and poisonous to the society. So, you know, in this podcast, I think it's one of the things that we're trying to do is really also avoid.
This kind of poisonous ideologies.
Definitely.
It's like just and the Holocaust makes it more difficult, because you were talking off camera before we started recording. The Holocaust, in the memory and pain of it, the trauma of it, it makes it more difficult for us to trust as a people. You know, like we're afraid of the Palestinians. We're afraid of the Arabs in general, I would say. We're afraid of a second Holocaust. I mean, if you ask any Jew who is who is more likely to commit a second Holocaust, we would definitely say Arabs. And that makes it very difficult for us to trust. And that makes peace harder.
That's also our problem, though, you know, like, because just to always think that Arabs are out to get us and we can never trust them, that's also never going to lead us anywhere positive.
Of course.
You know, many people are like that. Definitely.
I mean, there's also a conflict to resolve, guys, right? And that's what we're trying to do. You know, the kind of Arab-Israeli, Arab-Jewish conflict kind of started, you know, in the late 1920s, really, in the land of Israel, and kind of continued through. And of course, we know that some of the Palestinian leaders, like the Grand Mufti, had connections with the Nazi regime, and stuff like that. So I think reconciling history is also a huge part of resolving this conflict, and looking back at the past, recognizing wrongs, and putting measures in place to make sure they never happen again. So, you know, I kind of envision in the future, hopefully, Israelis and Palestinians can come together and mourn loved ones and lost ones, you know, maybe on the same day, maybe side by side, once this conflict is over, and we can push forward.
Yeah. Well, you know, maybe we should get started on that. You know, guys, I hope y'all have a great day. I hope you don't cry too much. And, you know, just give it a remembrance. We're not going to do the Thunderstrike of Righteousness on this ending. Thunderstrike of Righteousness is too happy for today. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, anyone watching this, just take a moment to remember to think about how horrid it would be. And yeah, never forget. I love you guys.
Absolutely.